Hey you, welcome to our channel. Today let's talk about cutting sugar cravings. So I know that this topic is one that's on a lot of our minds because we all feel like we eat too much sugar and that we're addicted to it, and it's just something that's really hard to cut out of our diets. So today I am going to give you 3 simple strategies to be able to help you cut those sugar cravings. My name is Heather Hall of realhealthymamas.com. I am a functional registered dietitian, and I am a mama of 4, soon to be 5 little ones. And I am really passionate about making healthy eating simple for busy mamas and helping you and your family be able to beat chronic disease and eat your way back to health. Tip number 1 for how to cut your sugar cravings. The very first thing that is going to help you to be able to cut your sugar cravings is to understand what it's doing to your body. So I could go into a lot of ways that sugar is negatively affecting your body. And when I say sugar, just understand that we're talking about added sugars. So sugars that are not naturally occurring in foods like fruits and milk, those are natural sugars. But we're talking about foods like white table sugar and corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup, and even like natural sweeteners like honey and pure maple syrup. They're being added to our foods to sweeten them. So that's the type of sugars that we're talking about here. So just keep that in mind. And while some of those options are healthier than others, like the more natural options are going to have more nutrients, and some of them will have less severe health effects than, something like high fructose corn syrup. Just understand we're just kind of talking about all added sugars and some of the effects that they have. One of the big problems with eating large amounts of these added sugars is how they affect a hormone called insulin. So sugar and insulin are really closely connected because when you eat sugar, then your body doesn't really have to digest it or break it down much. It can pretty much absorb it right into your bloodstream. And so you eat sugar, it gets absorbed into your bloodstream, and it makes your blood sugar levels rise. And your blood takes that sugar throughout all your body so that it can feed all of the cells in your body and give them energy. When your blood sugars start to rise, your pancreas releases a hormone that's called insulin. And what insulin does basically is it goes around and knocks on the doors of all of those cells in your body and says, hey, blood sugars are high out here. Go ahead and take some of those blood sugars up. It's okay. And your blood sugars will fall and return to normal levels because that sugar is now in your cells. Your body is able to maintain your blood sugars between about 80 and 99. For most people, that's going to be normal blood sugar levels. But what happens if you eat a lot of sugar all of the time? So think about our ancestors. Our ancestors for thousands of years have been eating, maybe 1 or 2 tablespoons of added sugars total a day. And that is, when it was in season or available to them. So that, would equate to somewhere around 15 to 30 grams of sugar total a day. The average American today is getting nearly 100 grams of sugar a day, which is 3 to 4 times what our ancestors were eating. And our bodies just aren't programmed to handle that. So what's the problem? So high levels of sugar in your blood frequently also means you're going to have high levels of insulin in your blood frequently. So your blood sugars will stay within normal levels. When you get tested at the doctor, there won't be any problem. But after a while, your cells get tired of that insulin that's chronically high because your sugar intake is chronically high. They get tired of that insulin going around and knocking on the door all the time, telling them to let sugar in. And what they do is they start to ignore the signals from insulin, and we call this insulin resistance. You eat sugar, your blood sugars rise, your pancreas releases that hormone insulin. Insulin goes around knocking on all the doors saying let sugar in, and your cells don't let in as much sugar as they should, so your blood sugars remain higher than normal. So your pancreas makes up for this by releasing even more insulin. Over time, your cells become more and more resistant to those signals from insulin, and they pretty much just stop listening to the insulin at all. And so your blood sugars will remain high and it takes very, very high levels of insulin in the blood for the cells to respond. This is when we start to notice that your blood sugars aren't staying below 100 after you eat a meal. And when you get tested at the doctor, you might be told that you have prediabetes if they find your levels are above 100, or if they're above 125, then you'll be told that you have diabetes. And so that's the point where you've got enough dysfunction going on that we're seeing it reflected in the blood sugars. But for years, before we ever even see those blood sugars start to show on your lab tests, your insulin levels in your blood have been elevated. And it's something that's not often tested for at the doctor, so you probably will never even know you have insulin resistance going on and that your insulin levels are chronically high. So again, who cares, right, if insulin levels are even high? Well, besides the fact that high insulin levels eventually lead to diabetes, which is a serious disease, we now know that high insulin levels also play a role in a whole slew of these other chronic diseases that we're dealing with these days. Diseases like heart disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, low testosterone, polycystic ovarian syndrome, fatty liver disease, sarcopenia, migraines, osteoarthritis, stroke, dementia, and cancer. So the other problem is that insulin is a hormone and it doesn't act in isolation. So when insulin levels are high, it eventually is going to have this ripple effect on your other systems throughout the body and cause dysfunction body-wide. Insulin has many jobs. So one of its jobs is also to signal the cells in your body to store fat. So think about what this means. When you have high insulin levels all of the time, your cells are being told to store a lot of fat. And what you do is you start storing it in places that you wouldn't normally store a lot of fat, like in your belly region and around your organs. Think of like fatty liver disease, and even throughout your muscles, causing muscle weakness and other problems. If your cells are insulin resistant, no matter what you do, you may struggle to lose weight until you're able to reverse that insulin resistance. Chances are, if you live in America, you have insulin resistance and you don't even know it. It's the most common condition worldwide, and more than half of Americans have it. But it is wise and helpful for pretty much everybody to just make sure you're cutting back on the amount of sugar in your diet. And I'll give you some recommendations for what this should be in a minute. So next time you're about to ask for a refill on your extra large cup of soda, or eat a pile of cookies in place of lunch, take a second to think about what is happening inside of your body when you do that. And I can promise you it makes a big difference in how much your fondness for those sugary foods when you understand just how much it's hurting your body. A second strategy for being able to cut back on your sugar cravings is to just eat balanced meals and snacks. Many of us crave sugar because we're riding the blood sugar roller coaster, essentially. So simple sugars like table sugar and syrups and fructose and honey are going to make your blood sugars rise quickly, like we talked about. But also simple starchy foods like white flour and white bread and processed cereals are also going to cause your blood sugars to rise very quickly, because those things are made up of starches, which are actually just long chains of sugars. And our bodies are pretty efficient at breaking down those chains of starches into the individual sugars that make them up, and then we're able to absorb them quickly into our bloodstream and then make our blood sugars rise. This is followed by a rise in insulin, but because we're not really programmed to handle copious amounts of sugar and refined carbohydrates, which are also pretty new to our diets, our bodies don't know how to respond to that. And so when our blood sugars rise that quickly, insulin also rises quickly, and it tends to cause an over response to our blood sugars in the beginning. And so blood sugars will then drop too quickly. And that's where you that's why you might end up, even after you feel like you had a pretty big meal or snack, you might end up feeling hungry only an hour or two later, or you end up craving sugars because your blood sugars have dropped too low. And now your body is thinking, I need more sugar. And so that's what you're going to crave. Here's a quick trick that I like to teach people. Make sure that you include a protein and a fat with your carbohydrates or starchy foods at every meal. And that you aren't skipping meals throughout the day. So I call this rule PFC times 3. That stands for protein, fat, carbohydrate, and 3 meals a day or every 3 hours, depending on which eating strategy is better for you. So remember that term. Remember PFC times 3 every time that you are putting together your meals and your snacks, and make sure you're including a substantial amount of proteins and healthy fats with that meal. Now, I do a whole nother video on balancing your plate and this PFC times 3 rule. So look for that video on our channel, and that would be a really good one to review to get some ideas of how to balance your meals and get off that blood sugar roller coaster so that you're not craving sugar so much. All right, tip number 3 for how to cut your cravings is to try out a low sugar lifestyle. So one of the best ways to crave less sugar is to eat less sugar. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because obviously that's the problem of why we're eating so much in the first place. Now, keep in mind that sugar is physically addictive. So the more you have of it, the more that you want it. And B, sugar is also an acquired taste. So the more sugar you have, the more sugar you need to be able to satisfy your taste buds and to be able to taste the sweetness of it. So in other countries, when they're using an American recipe for something sweet, they will routinely cut the sugar that the recipe calls for in half before they make the food, because they know that the stuff that we eat is just way too sugary for them, because they don't have that they don't eat as much sugar as we do, and they haven't acquired, they're not desensitized to it like our taste buds are. So the more sugar you eat, the more you need in order to be able to taste it and be satisfied by it. I recommend setting a goal of reducing your sugar intake. Try it for just 3 weeks. And for women and children, it's recommended that you eat 25 grams or less of added sugars, and for men, 36 grams or less. And remember that we're just talking about added sugars here. So if you're eating like a whole piece of fruit, or drinking some milk that has naturally occurring sugars in it, we're not going to count those. And read your food labels, because the new food labels have to tell you how much of the sugar in the product is added sugars now. You'll probably be surprised by how much sugar you truly are eating. Most people are eating more sugar than they think they are, but people also find that as they practice this for 3 weeks of eating low sugar, it's also not as hard to eat less sugar as they think it will be. You don't have to totally cut sugar from your diet in order to be healthy and see the health benefits. And then they also learn to, cut the sugar out in places where it doesn't really matter to them and keep it in the places where it does. And so I recommend give it a 3-week trial and see if you don't feel differently. See if you don't have better energy or less headaches, or, maybe you've been having some tingling in your arms and things. Maybe you experience, feeling a little nauseous and woozy or moody in between meals. And notice, just make note if those symptoms don't lessen. And if you don't feel like eating less sugar is doing anything for you, then give yourself permission to go back to eating sugar the way that you were before. What I found almost without exception is that after a few weeks of this, people's cravings drop, and you start to be able to taste the natural sweetness of sugar more, and to enjoy, foods like fruit that are naturally sweet more, because you don't need quite so much sweetness in order to be able to satisfy that sweet tooth. And most people feel better, and they don't really necessarily want to start eating more sugar again. So give it a trial and see if that happens for you. So there you have it. There are 3 ways to reduce your sugar cravings. So first is understand what sugar is doing inside of your body, like raising your insulin and in turn your risk for tons of other diseases, and causing, chronic problems, excess body fat, all of that sort of thing. It makes sugar a little bit less enticing. Second, get off of the blood sugar roller coaster by using the PFC ×3 rule, and look for our video on balancing your plate to learn more about that. Third, reduce your addiction to and your taste for sugary, sweetened things by following the sugar lifestyle that I recommend for 3 weeks' time, which is 25 grams or less of added sugars for women and children, and 36 grams or less of added sugars a day for men. If you found this video helpful, please be sure that you hit that like button and share it, because it will help this sort of information to reach more people. It's a really big help. Thanks for watching.